Harlem, 1970s. One moved in silence, the other lit up magazine covers. Both flooded the streets with heroin, death, and betrayal. But only one was called the most dangerous: Frank Lucas and Nicky Barnes. Who really ran this hell? Before we move on to the next part, please give me a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for listening. New York, 1970. Harlem wasn't just a neighborhood, it was a battlefield. Quiet, but relentless. The streets pulsed with sirens, broken glass, and bodies lost to the needle. Heroin wasn't a drug anymore. It was a currency, a warhead, a plague. In this chaos, two men rose from the underground, not as gangsters hiding in shadows, but as architects of an empire built on addiction: Frank Lucas and Nicky Barnes. Frank Lucas came from LaGrange, North Carolina. Dirt roads, no money, no choices. He moved to Harlem in his teens and found his way into the crew of Ellsworth "Bumpy" Johnson, one of the most feared black crime figures of the 60s. When Bumpy died, most expected Lucas to disappear. He didn't. Instead, he built something bigger, quieter, sharper. He didn't trust the Italians. He didn't trust anyone. So he went straight to the source: the Golden Triangle. While American soldiers fought and died in Vietnam, Lucas used military transport planes to smuggle heroin hidden in caskets and duffel bags. At his peak, he claimed to move up to $1 million worth of heroin per day under his own brand, Blue Magic. Nicky Barnes was Harlem-born, Harlem-raised. He wasn't just street smart, he was book smart. He knew the law, used it, twisted it. While Lucas worked in silence, Barnes did the opposite. He built the Council, a 7-man syndicate modeled after the mafia. It controlled heroin distribution, resolved internal disputes, and issued punishment for betrayal. Barnes didn't hide. He wore $3,000 suits, drove matching cars, and made the cover of the New York Times Magazine in 1977 under the headline, Mr. Untouchable. Both men were black. Both men were self-made. Both used intelligence, ruthlessness, and strategy to dominate a billion-dollar underground economy. But they couldn't have been more different. Lucas operated like a military general, tight, silent, efficient. Barnes ran his business like a CEO, loud, connected, and impossible to ignore. One controlled the supply chain from Southeast Asia. The other controlled the streets of Harlem. Their methods would change the way organized crime worked in America, bypassing traditional mafia routes, corrupting local institutions, and creating internal systems that mirrored actual governments. By the mid-70s, Harlem wasn't just flooded with heroin. It was under siege by two different criminal ideologies. And the question wasn't just who made more money, it was who caused more damage, who left a bigger scar, who still echoes today. That's what we'll uncover, not just by telling their stories, but by breaking them apart, side by side. Frank Lucas didn't deal in chaos. He dealt in control. His power came from silence, not the absence of violence, but the absence of noise. No flashy cars, no loud suits, no interviews, just results. He understood early on that visibility was vulnerability. That's why he cut out the middlemen. While most traffickers relied on the Italian mafia or Dominican networks to move heroin, Lucas went directly to the poppy fields of Southeast Asia. According to federal investigations, his heroin tested at over 98% purity, twice the strength of most street-level product at the time. It was cheaper, purer, and more addictive. He called it Blue Magic, and he protected the brand like a corporation protects a trademark. If dealers diluted the product, he shut them down. Sometimes with money, sometimes with bullets. Lucas built his empire like a family business. He only hired relatives or people he'd grown up with. Loyalty wasn't requested. It was required. The entire operation ran with military precision. Cash came in through shoeboxes. Heroin moved through hidden compartments in cargo planes. Even law enforcement admitted Lucas didn't just build a drug empire, he created an efficient, low-profile logistical machine in the middle of America's largest city. Nicky Barnes, on the other hand, was loud by design. To him, power didn't just need to be held, it needed to be seen. He walked into courtrooms with tailored suits and gold watches, staring down judges like he owned the bench. He structured the council to mimic the mafia's commission. 7 members with equal votes, responsible for overseeing territories, setting prices, and eliminating threats. In 1976, DEA agents estimated that Barnes controlled heroin distribution across 6 major U.S. states, with Harlem as the headquarters. What made Barnes especially dangerous wasn't just his reach, it was his adaptability. He used lawyers the way others used soldiers. He knew the loopholes in drug law and exploited them. When jailed, he continued to run operations from inside, using coded phone calls, corrupt guards, and a network of couriers. But when it comes to psychology, the 2 men couldn't have been more different. Lucas was clinical. His motivation was rooted in survival. Born poor, dismissed by the world, determined to never need anyone again. Money was power, and power meant safety. He didn't want fame. He wanted control. Barnes wanted both. His motivation was ego, legacy, presence. He saw himself as a cultural icon, not just a businessman, but a symbol. He hosted parties with judges, sponsored community events, and even tried to position himself as a Robin Hood of Harlem. But beneath the surface, Barnes was ruthless. Disloyalty was met with disappearance. Control was enforced with precision, and no matter how loud he played, he never lost sight of the numbers. There was one thing they had in common: betrayal. Lucas was taken down after a lengthy federal probe, but what ended his reign wasn't law enforcement alone. It was leaks from inside his trusted circle. Barnes was no different. The council broke its own rules. Members slept with his mistress, skimmed from the top, and ignored orders. And when Barnes found out, locked up in Marion Federal Penitentiary, he didn't just get mad, he got even. He gave up everything. Dozens of names, addresses, financials, supply chains. In 1982, based on his testimony, the federal government launched a massive wave of indictments that took down entire sections of Harlem's drug trade. He didn't just snitch, he detonated the machine he built. Lucas did the same. After his arrest in 1975, he cooperated with the DEA, helping to expose over 100 corrupt officers within the NYPD and elsewhere. He knew the system, and when it turned against him, he pulled it apart from the inside. Their empires didn't collapse from outside pressure. They collapsed because of the very thing they claimed to control: loyalty. 2 men, 2 methods, 2 minds, one rooted in discipline, the other in dominance. Both saw themselves as untouchable. Both were wrong. Coming up next, how dangerous were they really? And what kind of damage did they leave behind? By the time the dust settled, Harlem wasn't just wounded, it was gutted. Frank Lucas and Nicky Barnes didn't just push heroin, they redefined how it moved, who profited from it, and how deeply it could carve into the bones of a community. To measure their danger, you don't start with the drugs. You start with the ripple effect. At his peak, Lucas was responsible for distributing heroin across multiple boroughs of New York City. His direct-to-source model made heroin not only more potent, but also more affordable, which meant it reached further, faster. Hospitals reported a sharp rise in overdoses tied to blue magic. In one 12-month period between 1972 and 1973, Harlem saw a 45% increase in heroin-related emergency calls. a spike largely attributed to Lucas's product. It wasn't just better heroin, it was weaponized addiction. But the most disturbing part was how long it lasted. Even after his arrest in 1975, the infrastructure Lucas built didn't collapse immediately. Parts of his distribution network continued to function. Some relatives and associates simply changed suppliers and kept the wheels turning. The system he created had become bigger than him. Barnes, by contrast, was more centralized. His empire depended on the council, and when that collapsed, the organization died with it. But during its run, the damage was no less devastating. Federal authorities estimated that by 1976, his group was distributing between 20 and 30 kilograms of heroin per month, with profits reaching into the tens of millions annually. His territory stretched beyond New York, reaching New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and even parts of the Midwest. And because of Barnes's influence within the justice system, law enforcement found it nearly impossible to penetrate his inner circle until his infamous betrayal. In terms of body count, addiction, and social decay, both left scars that Harlem still carries. But their danger wasn't just physical, it was psychological. They normalized the drug trade as a business. Lucas ran his network like a supply chain. Barnes ran his like a corporation, and both blurred the lines between criminal and entrepreneur in ways that seduced a generation. For many young men in Harlem, they weren't just dealers. They were role models. They wore suits, held meetings, gave orders. They didn't look like the corner hustlers scraping to survive. They looked like they owned the world. That image, slick, powerful, untouchable, proved just as dangerous as any product they sold. Law enforcement struggled to keep up. Corruption inside the NYPD was rampant. Lucas's cooperation revealed over 100 officers on his payroll, including some working in narcotics units. Barnes, even while imprisoned, continued to manipulate the system using legal channels, buying time and favors. They didn't just exploit the drug market. They exploited the very institutions meant to stop them. If there's a difference in legacy, it's in how they exited. Lucas, after serving 5 years, tried to remake his image. He appeared in interviews, cooperated with Hollywood, and presented himself as a reformed man. Barnes, once proud and loud, vanished after entering witness protection in the 1980s. He died in secret in 2012. Unrecognizable, unnamed. So who was more dangerous? Lucas broke the supply chain and rebuilt it in his image. He industrialized heroin at a scale Harlem had never seen. Barnes controlled people, soldiers, politicians, entire courtrooms. He made the drug trade social, structural, even political. Lucas was the ghost. Barnes was the spotlight. Together, they shattered Harlem's stability from 2 different angles. And in the ruins, they left more than overdoses and empty homes. They left a blueprint, one that others would follow. Names like Alpo Martinez, Rich Porter, and even future kingpins like Freeway. Rick Ross borrowed pages from their playbooks. What made them legendary wasn't just the drugs, the power, or the money. It was the fact that for a brief, terrifying moment, 2 men with no privilege, no backing, and no limits rewrote the rules of American organized crime. And in doing so, they made Harlem the heart of a war it never asked for, but one it could never forget. 2 men, 2 methods, 1 decade soaked in blood. One controlled the supply, the other controlled the people. Both left Harlem changed forever. If you found this story worth hearing, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. More true crime stories are coming. And now it's your turn. Frank Lucas, the silent operator, or Nicky Barnes, the showman king? Who do you think was truly more dangerous? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.